My friend Ben asked if I wanted to join him on a 3-night frogging trip to Mid North Coast, New South Wales. There were several frog species neither of us had yet seen. With the blessing of my wife, we hit the road for a 7-hour drive to Hat Head National Park in New South Wales. Ben had already driven 4 hours from Bundaberg in Queensland. We'd been monitoring the weather forecast closely, and thankfully, wet weather was expected during our time in northern New South Wales. Upon arriving at Hat Head, only 4 millimetres of rain had fallen. We checked out some frog habitat before it got dark. Most of the lagoons were dry, but we eventually found a single green and golden bell frog where some water remained. At this point, the showers and wind began, and as we left the coastal dunes, I spotted a young bleating tree frog. This species had recently been split into 3, and neither of us had seen this particular one. We headed to the nearby bushland and immediately found our second target, the coastal banjo frog, which had also recently been split into 3 separate species. I soon heard a distant chorus, and upon checking it out, we found dozens of dusky gungans, along with a few Haswell's frogs, which was a new species for Ben. Later, we learnt that some of the dusky gungans we photographed were actually Marnie's toadlets, with this record contributing to a 200-kilometre range extension for this species. We turned in for the night as it continued to drizzle. During the night, I discovered my enclosed stretcher bed was no longer waterproof, and I woke the next morning to my leg lying in water. Upon leaving the site, we helped remove a fallen tree blocking the road, a casualty of the strong winds. We found 3 public showers at a servo before heading inland to our second site, Bulga State Forest, for 3 more target species. This park was stunning, and we soon found ideal habitat for our target species. We tried to locate a cooling sphagnum frog in the afternoon, but it stopped before we could lock onto a location to search. The rain continued to fall, and we abandoned this search to meet up with our friend Grant. Together, we descended to a creek and found dozens of the threatened Davies tree frog, a stunning animal, particularly the females. Also present were some Barrington Tops tree frogs. We expected to find good numbers of the southern stuttering frog here, however only found a juvenile animal. We climbed out of this site and walked along the roads, where we found several black-soled frogs and some wearing tree frogs. The rain continued, and thankfully a nearby campground offered a large picnic shelter, which we made good use of, as much of our bedding was now wet from the night before. We cooked up our first hot meal for the trip. It was 9 degrees outside. I sought out the top of a picnic table where I could lay out my mostly dry bedding and had a surprisingly good night's sleep. On our final day, we changed plans and would now drive 6 hours to the Queensland-New South Wales border to save Ben a 13-hour drive to Bundaberg the following day. Upon arrival, we would visit Wollongong National Park for an endemic marsupial frog. It rained the entire trip. A low-pressure system sitting just off the coast, responsible for the wind and rain, was ramping up, with some areas already having received several hundred millimetres of rain. Having dodged a number of branches on the drive, we were almost at our location when our heart sank, realising we would not be driving across a flooded river. After some intensive research, we identified an alternative location to access the frog's habitat. We arrived and began walking uphill, but unfortunately the weather system continued to track inland and the sound of heavy rain made it difficult to hear much else. We returned back to the ute and made our way to my friend Dimitri's house on the border, where he and his wife were very generous in providing us a hot meal and a room for the night. All up, we saw 18 frog species and had another 3 species. It was a pretty successful trip, and we were both glad to get home to see our young families.